Hi folks, thanks for checking out this video. Some people were asking for some bouzouki content. So yeah, I wanted to talk about two things today. Substitutions. So chordal substitutions and then substitutions in accompaniment for tunes. So first we'll talk about some basic or alternate ways of looking at chords on the bouzouki, and then how we can apply those, and then maybe after them we can think about arrangement and backing tunes and using chord substitutions, not substituting the notes in the chords but actually substituting the chords in the actual backing of the tunes. So right, so first off, I'm playing a Foley bouzouki in G-D-A-D tuning, which I prefer to G-D-A-E, but everyone is different. This just works well for me, for backing especially. So we're all familiar, or most of us are familiar with the basic chordal structure and chordal shapes of the bouzouki. Your primary bar forms and your two or three main form shapes, I guess, chordal shapes we could call them, that you use on the bouzouki, especially in G-D-A-D tuning. If you're in G-D-A-E, of course, compensate accordingly. G-D-A-D, of course, works well for me, and from that form of the G chord, one common shape, so open, second fret, open, gives us a G chord in the form of a G, a D, which is your third, your B note in the G chord, and your fifth. So you have, in that way, you have a root, a fifth, a third, and a fifth. That's one form of the chord. G major. Move that third to minor third. We have a G minor. So out of those two chords, you can get your major. You can get your chord shapes. The other one that's very common is the A dyad, which is really an A, an E, an A, and an E. So it contains neither minor nor major, which is great for modal sounding tunes and modal sounding songs. It doesn't give you your happy or your sad note, like A major here does. It gives you a more solid, like a power chord on a guitar. So that's an A, an E, an A, and E. Of course, that's barrable. B, C, D, E, F, and the octave G. Those are two very common bar forms or bar chord shapes on the bouzouki. A minor, B minor, C, D, E minor, back to G. Or the other forms, A, B, C, D, E, G. So depending on what you're doing and what the application is, those two forms can create, you can basically make any chords out of those basic shapes. But you're always stuck with the relationship between notes. You're always stuck with the root, the fifth, the major third or minor third, and the fifth. Now we can make versions of that as well. Instead of having a fifth on top, we can have the G note. So we get a root, a fifth, a third, and an octave root note. That's one option. G minor is a little tougher like that. Major chord is a lot easier. That's one option, is changing out the notes in that chord. Much longer reach if you're going to bar that. My fingers won't reach. Some people's might. If you're way up the neck, you might be able to reach. Yeah, you could reach it way up the neck. Possible at the 12th fret, not really possible for my fingers on the open position. I like to play out of the open position a lot, and that brings us to chord inversions. So once you have your basic chord shapes down, then you can move on to your chord inversions. And what chord inversions are chord tones, or the triad of notes that make up chords, but with different notes in the building of the chords. So rather than starting from a root note with G, D, B, D, another one I really like to put is very similar to the D chord on the guitar with the thumb wrapped over the bass string, is the G with a B in the bass, which I end up with a B note, a G note, a D note, and a G note. So I end up with 2 G's in the chord, a D, but I end up with that colorful sounding major third in the bass position. Another common open G chord is your start at the 5th, D, G, D, G. Again, a dyad, it doesn't contain minor or major third. Useful chord though, but adding the 4th in the bass gives you a pretty interesting tone. Of course, playable anywhere on the neck. So yeah, inversions of the chords. Another common one is D chord in its full normal or native progression: D, F sharp, A, D. The first inversion on the piano: D, F sharp, A, and D. Not everyone's favorite D chord, but D chord with the second inversion of the D chord would be the 5th in the bass, which is an A. We all probably use that chord fairly often. That's a D with a low A note in the bass, which is the 5th in D. A weighty sounding D chord versus just playing the 7th fret on the G string and having 2 D notes, an A and a D. The A in the bass gives you that weighty sounding D chord with a 5th in the bass. There's an A with that major third in the bass I'm talking about, which lends very nicely to resolving back to D. So depending on where the chords are going, substituting the different inversions and different shapes of the chords can keep things sounding fairly interesting. A D chord on a guitar, or with the 5th up top. D chord with the major third in the bass, so first inversion of the D major chord. Easy to suspend chords then when you play the different inversions. So lots of possibilities on the instrument, lots of native sounding open tunings too on the bouzouki that are really great. You don't always need to pair and get the same sounding chords and the same relationship between the notes. B flat is another great example, or F. F with the major third in the bass, which is an A note, or the 5th in the bass. Different sounding F. Some rattle going on here. Time to change the strings. But another great chord on the bouzouki is that is a B flat in it. Or you can play the F, which is the 5th in B flat. We end up with B flat, F, B flat, D, which is your 3rd, or your 5th, which is F, which is just the A chord moved up 1 fret. But I think this chord sounds much more colorful. Or that one, like that version of the B major. E flat. lots of look at your open strings and look at where you are and see what you can use to make different chord shapes. And another reason why I don't like playing with a capo, because the capo removes some of those open strings and some of those tonal choices. So experiment, trying to come up with your own chords or your own voicings for chords. So that's a really quick look at playing chords in different formations and different inversions of the chords, depending on where you choose to put the focus on the notes in the chord. All right, so we'll probably move on to talking about not substituting notes or positions of notes in the chord, but the actual using the chord substitutions in accompanying tunes, without getting into the theory too much of it. Right, when we're accompanying tunes, in general, the goal should be to accompany the melody or rhythmic aspect of the tune, but adhering to the melody of the tune. Every chord doesn't fit under every part of the tune. You need to be aware of the melodic relationship in the tune, hence why the backing for a lot of tunes might be similar, but a lot of them are different. If a D tune goes to A and you stay in D, it's going to sound odd for a reason, because you're not following the chords of the melody with the chords that make up with the notes that make up the chord, rather. So a good example I can probably use is a reel where most of us are familiar with, the Sailor's Bonnet, and accompanying it using basic chord forms, which certainly work, depending on your rhythmic pattern, whether it's flowery and embellished or it's chunky and rhythmic. We've got choices there too. So if we think about the tune, we've got options to play the Sailor's Bonnet. So one thing I like to do is to substitute chords in the Sailor's Bonnet, and I like to use the minor chords. The B minor to substitute for D, as it's the relative minor of the D chord. It contains some of the same notes. D, F sharp are in the D chord. They're also in the B minor chord. B minor, B, F sharp, B. Another thing too is minor 7th chords contain the 5th from the major chord. So if we look at the key of D and I play the relative minor chord as a minor 7th, I have a B, I have an F sharp, I have an A, I can either have a D or an F sharp. So I've got a lot of choices there for chord substitution, which should work over the melody flowing over a D major progression. So if we think about the Sailor's Bonnet, accompaniment for the Sailor's Bonnet using all the things we talked about previously. So the D chord in the first inversion or the second inversion, the B minor chord over the second part. Here I've used the F sharp minor, which is I'm actually using the C sharp, which is the 5th in the bass. That's a version of F sharp minor. F sharp minor also playable up here. Here. Careful enough to let that D note ring out, and then back to my G, the G I talked about earlier, that high form G. And you have movement within those chords, so the turn of Sailor's Bonnet there. I've got options here: 3, 4. Alternative way of playing the turn of Sailor's Bonnet. They're using those chord inversions, using chord substitution, substituting minors. I substituted the B minor there for a D. I substituted the F sharp minor, which works because the melody has a lot of those similar notes. Over to B minor. We have A's and F sharps here. Over my A's and F sharps, I'm playing an F sharp minor chord. And then back to my G. So rather than playing the Sailor's Bonnet with D and G and A, which you certainly can do, you can substitute the minor chords and for the turn, just to push it somewhere different. That stuff I'm just moving around on the bass string, and I'm just walking down. I'm using the top string to walk down from that. And those are just following the different inversions of the D chord. It's still a D chord. Down to my B minor chord. I'm adding an A note in the F sharp minor chord, which is already there. And I have a G chord. Back to my root, which is D. Yeah, so once again, the turn of this, or the whole Sailor's Bonnet, using my chord substitutions and my different chord voicings. 3, 4. Just accompanying a tune using different versions of the same chords, or the different voicings of the same chords with chord substitution. So hopefully people will get something out of this, and just spur on ideas about chord voicings on the bouzouki and chord selection. The whole rhythmic thing is another whole video for some other time, perhaps. So. Thanks for watching, everyone. Cheers. All the best.